Hello and welcome to the Dead End Podcast, a project in collaboration with California Humanities. In this podcast, we aim to highlight the multiple dead ends faced by our team while searching for resources given to the homeless population in the Inland Empire. Today, we welcome our first journalist, Eduardo Pinez. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Not bad. So to get into this, right, I kind of want to get into the know of what was your angle, what did you do for this project, what was kind of your role in this?
Oh yeah, so first off, the entire project is based on the homeless community that is around Rancho and the Inland Empire, because that's what we mostly focused on, as this is our community around us. That was our main thing. Just trying to see what resources are available to people, honestly, because you do see all these people at parks in the mornings, because they do scatter out throughout the day,
Yeah,
but usually in the mornings you just see a gathering of them at like parks or at downtown or something.
for sure. And how did you guys kind of get to this topic that you eventually landed on?
Initially, the topic was just like I mentioned, finding resources, seeing can we create something where we can gather these resources and lead these people kind of in a way to help them. But as time went on, we noticed that a lot of these resources aren't actually very helpful.
Really? Okay. So I feel like the first thing that people think of when they're thinking of resources and things that are available to them, they think of laws and propositions. Is there anything there that you found?
At least laws, from what I saw, there was not much to find, especially looking through, again, we'll stay in Rancho Cucamonga. There's not much you can find there. And in reality, it's like something I think that needs to be addressed because California does have one of the highest homeless rates in the country.
Yeah,
And we do see propositions pop up for like improving mental health facilities or homeless shelters. Like most recently in March, the primary election, we saw a proposition going on the ballot where it said they would get a bond for $3 billion,
wow.
and that would be used for mental health institutions or even homeless shelters. It was essentially a bill to help homeless.
That sounds really great. And from what I'm hearing, it has not been enacted yet.
So it was the first thing. We won't find out till after everything, but yeah, it's in there. I don't know what the status of the whole prop is, but it was on the ballot. That's as far as I know.
And last, when it comes to this, do you think it's important for our listeners to take a look into this proposition and maybe do their own research and possibly vote for or against?
Yeah, I think it's something you people need to look into, especially if we're talking about homeless here. It's something that we need to look into, especially if it's something that affects our community.
For sure. So moving on from more of the federal side, let's move into a little bit closer to home, right? So can you explain to me some resources that you did find or any trails that you had within the city or the Inland Empire?
I tried looking specifically for resources at first
Yeah.
through city websites because I know usually you go through the city, you can find stuff. I know you can go through the county and find stuff, but I try to stick to with the city because a lot of people don't know that you can just go to the county as well.
Yeah.
So sticking to the city, um, I just went to their website, tried looking. Although I will be honest, looking for resources is very difficult as a lot of the stuff is hidden.
Yeah, I feel like naturally most people go to a website or goes to that type of resource to find something, and the fact that it's hidden and hard to find definitely kind of feels sketchy for sure. So, was there any specific resources that you did uncover throughout multiple like layers of websites and pages you had to sift through?
There was not much. I mean, the thing I found the most common was, well, there are resources for housing services, but a lot of this stuff was mostly aimed at helping low income or people struggling with rent, people struggling with getting food, because there was a bunch of food bank options as well, but nothing specifically for like homeless. Be like, here's a shelter that you can probably look into.
So it sounds like they're still marginalizing between low income and homeless individuals. There's still a gap between those two when it comes to resources.
Yes, there's definitely a gap, especially going through stuff like that.
Yeah,
You go through the housing services and you see a lot of stuff. It's like low income and not homeless.
yeah,
There are a couple of them, but they're not very helpful.
for sure.
And I did go in person to see these places and see what they provided.
As a quick question, right? What is kind of the difference between shelters and food banks so we can kind of differentiate the two?
Well, shelter, at least in the state of California, because laws don't typically exist anymore,
Wow.
but usually they are places where a person can stay overnight for a day or even a couple of days. While a food bank is just like people donate food and then people in need can go and try to get some nutritional food from them.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's what a food bank sounds like. So that's good to kind of get that out of the way, right? So I kind of want to hear about your each and every experience that you had going down to these food banks or resources, right, and where they led you.
Well, to be fair, the food banks, I did end up going to two of them. So one of them had their offices was completely closed, so I couldn't get any information from them. And then the people working there were like, "Oh, we're just volunteers." So that was basically useless. There was not any information I can get there.
They didn't give
They
you
didn't give
anything.
me any like, "Oh, are you here for this, that?" They didn't. They were like, "Oh, we're just volunteers. We don't know when the office opens." And I was like, "Well, that's kind of
That's odd. Yeah.
useless." And then there was a second food bank I did go to. That one was a little bit more helpful, but not much. Um, and again, majority of the people, or most of the people, were like volunteers. I asked them, I was like, "So, what is there any way I can get help in like finding what I need for resources, or how do you guys run this place? Is there like a system?" They were like, "Oh, yeah, here's a flyer. We're just volunteers. I don't know how to speak from personal experience." And then they gave me a phone number and they were like, "Call them. This is going to be the person that runs the program, but you have to kind of catch them at the right time because they're in and out. So they're
That's
never fully there." So,
that's very interesting. You're already there,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
can't give you anything. They give you a little pamphlet.
Yeah, they gave me a pamphlet.
Wow.
So going off of that actually, so they have an office in LA, in the LA County area in Pomona.
This is a separate office.
No, well, yeah, it's a separate
Okay,
office. It's a branch essentially.
I
So
got you.
so this food bank was in Ontario. It
Okay.
was a branch. So I ended up going to the main office and seeing what I can get there. They're more helpful than food bank. They did give me some flyers, some pamphlets. They're like, "Oh, we do this, this, and that." They're like, "Yeah, we have multiple locations in the Inland Empire." They're like, where are you based from?" I was like, "Oh, I'm like from Ontario." They're like, "Oh yeah, there's this Ontario location." I'm like, "Yeah, I was there earlier in the morning."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, usually you can go there. You just need to read the flyer, and it tells you what you need." Going through the flyer, it's like you need an ID, you need a pay stub to get access to this food bank. Essentially, it's just like to confirm your low income. It's not
Yeah.
really homeless.
It's not homeless. It's
No,
still low income.
yeah, it's low
Interesting.
income. But as I was talking more with them as well, they were like, "We did provide shelters a long time ago, but not recently."
I see.
I was like, "Oh, that's interesting."
So those were the two food banks that you went
Yeah,
to,
those
right?
are two food banks.
Okay. Now, could you give me a little bit more information about the other few that you went to as well?
So the other one wasn't a food bank. It was like a resource hub. That's what it mentioned.
So it was an
So
Ontario Resource Hub.
yeah, essentially.
Okay.
So it was run by the Ontario city themselves.
Wow.
So I ended up going there, but when I showed up, it was closed. It was completely closed. There was no one there. Everything was locked.
What'd they say
And
about that?
then so actually, there was a sign on the outside that's like, "Oh, this is temporary closed. If you need help, here's a number. Call it." So we did end up calling the number, and when we called, the person's like, "Oh yeah, the location's closed indefinitely. Is there anything you need?" I was like, "Yeah, I just wanted to see like, will it ever open up again?" They're like, "No, it's closed indefinitely for an emergency." I was like, "What's the emergency?" She was like, "Oh, I can't tell you that." I'm like, "Okay, that's weird."
That is
Like this
very
is supposed
weird.
to be a resource, and honestly, looking at the location, it was mainly just a couple of bathrooms and like an office. So, I mean, as a homeless person, you probably just want to use the bathroom. Like it would be
Yeah,
useful for
it's
them.
practically useless. So after that kind of dead end, there's one more or two more places that you
So,
visited.
well, speaking on the city of Ontario, I did try contacting them because there weren't many options from them specifically, surprisingly. And I tried seeing what else there was, and they would just be like, I remember calling, so I called again. They were like, "Oh yeah, I can forward you to someone." And then they forwarded me to them, and then they were like, "Oh, if you want more answers, here's an email. Email me about what information you like and I can forward it to you." Did that. They sent me the same link that was I was already on. I was like
Useless.
I was like, "This is information I already have and I looked for myself." Like
Yeah.
that's why I called in the first place. So that was very strange. Yeah, there was not much else there.
So that was rendered useless, and those were all the the places that you went and visited in person?
There was one more place.
Okay,
This one is actually a place that's on a lot of cities' websites. A lot of places link them to here. It's called Foothill Family Shelter,
I
and
see.
it's one of the places we end up trying to get in contact with the most because,
They're
again,
local too.
yeah. So most of the cities here link them in their profile
Yeah,
in their
they
website.
recommend
They're
going to this
recommended
place.
like resource. That's like one of the biggest ones. We saw it in Rancho. We saw it in Ontario. We saw it in Uplands and Fontanas. It's all of them.
And I believe when we were doing some research together, more so as a group, when we look up like shelters near me or just basic Google search that I feel like any homeless person would do just to kind of start their search, Foothill Family Shelter was always on the top of the search.
Yeah, it was always on there. So we ended up. Well, I ended up going in person. We tried contacting them multiple ways, but in my experience, I ended up going in person, trying to get information as well. And they were like, "Oh, you need to set up a meeting." And I
You're
was
already
like,
there.
"Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." And they were like, "Here's a business card with a QR code. You should be able to set up a meeting with the person that works here." I was like, "Oh," or like the main person in charge.
Yeah,
I end up using the QR code. QR code is dead. It's a dead link. Like
that's
it
crazy.
doesn't work.
Nonetheless, they were very
Yeah,
useless.
yeah, very. It was not useful information. And even going in person, it says it's a shelter. You get on site and it's like an office. It's literally nothing but office. It's very strange.
So I'll leave you with three questions, right? Three-part questions. So the first one is, are these resources really for the homeless or are they more so for low income?
Well, the thing is, I think it is more for low income. The other thing we need to kind of acknowledge is um, these locations are not all close to each other. They're all very spread out. Like I mentioned, a lot of places have the Foothill Family Shelter as their main one of their main locations that you should go if you are homeless or need help as a resource. But like I mentioned, Rancho, Fontana, Ontario, Upland, I think Montclair mentions them as well. This location is literally like on the border of Montclair and Upland.
I see.
So if you are in like Rancho, Ontario,
Fontana.
Fontana, you're looking minimum 5, 6 miles.
Yeah, that's a
And as a
lot.
homeless person, if you don't have a car, because I know there are homeless with cars, living in their car day to day. But if you don't have a car, you have to walk all the way over there
Or public
or
transportation, which
public
costs money
transport.
and
Yeah,
resources.
yeah,
Can I also add a statistic that I have, right? So if Chaffey College is the starting point for the distance between each shelter that was listed on San Bernardino's official like resource guide, the average distance is around 42 miles between each shelter, right? That is crazy. That is something that the closest one is 36.1 miles away. That is a lot of distance for someone, especially if even if they're a student at Chaffey or around Chaffey, that's a large distance to travel. And these are the official ones listed on the San Bernardino
yeah.
resource
San
guide.
Bernardino County has a couple other ones, but yeah, a lot of people forget that San Bernardino County is one of the biggest counties in California. I think it is the biggest one actually.
That would make sense.
Yeah, so that doesn't really help anything. But even then, like I said, 5, 6 miles is not something a homeless person is willing to travel.
And that's at minimum. Like
Yeah,
obviously, like it depends on where you're located and the
yeah,
closest one to you. But like I said, if Chaffey College is the starting point, the closest one is 36.1 miles away. That's on the official resource guide.
yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be different ones you can visit, but if you're going based off that, you have a trek
Yeah,
in
no,
front of
of
you.
course. And then like these resources are supposed to be attempts at, helping the homeless, helping people.
And are
But
they
but
working?
are they useful? I mean, from my experience of going to these places, there really isn't much because as I mentioned earlier, the food banks, they ask for ID and a pay stub, and if they don't have that, then what are they supposed to do?
So they're not really working.
And it's not easy to find these resources either. Like I said, you have to go online. What if I know again, people
Libraries and
as at
stuff, but
libraries, people have phones nowadays. It's part of standard living at this point. Even if it is just a beat up old phone, people have one. Oh,
again, that's resources and
it's
money.
resources and money. So you can try looking for these resources, but it's going to be really rare to actually look for them.
It's a waste of time, waste of resources, which are already scarce for these people that are homeless. So I'm gonna leave you on one last question, right? How easy is it for someone in your shoes as a student, as a journalist, to get through this stuff? And as lastly, is there any tips that you can give out to those doing this conducting the search, whether it's just straight up saving their time and moving on.
I mean, honestly, how easy is it? It's not easy. And I think we kind of need to make that known. It's not easy to find these resources. It's something that is very difficult to get a hold of, and we need to, if we're trying to help, as California is, because like I mentioned, they're always mentioning it. It's always being brought up. It's not, they don't shy away from it.
Yeah,
It's
unless it's
something.
helping.
Yeah, we need to find a way to help. We need to find to make these resources easier, because a lot of people don't get the help they need.
And you would recommend these people just to save their time rather than digging for
Well, um,
resources.
I think it's a little bit of both. You need to
Pick your
find,
battles.
yeah, you,
That would make sense.
yeah, because you can look for resources. Maybe they'll help you, maybe they won't. As a homeless person, you need to find things like you can't.
Quick.
Yeah,
Thank you for your time, Ed. And
thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be back for episode 2. Thank you.